Welcome to this web lecture on mitigating transport emissions, modal shift and electrification. So what we have been seeing is that transport contributes to more than 20% of global GHG emissions, and that transport emissions continue to increase as a result from the continued increase of transport in the first place. So what we can do to reduce transport emissions is modal shift. So we can replace trucks by other modes of transport, and we can also electrify the vehicles that we're already having. But all of these, of course, imply that we have to adapt operations accordingly. So one option, and the first option that comes to mind mostly if you look outside, is electric vehicles. Electric vehicles come with lower emissions, and if we use green energy, possibly even zero emissions, and they often have lower operational costs due to the fact that energy out of electricity is often cheaper than electricity out of gas or diesel. But why are we currently at 14.5% uptake internationally on vehicles? And if we're looking into buses and trucks, even in the single digits, so 4.5% on buses and 1.2% on trucks. The reason for that is oftentimes there's higher fixed costs and there's range anxiety. So range anxiety means in the first place that you actually have to recharge more often, and that this recharging takes longer time than just refueling your truck. But secondly, it also has to do with the psychology of it all, that you're more afraid to run out of electricity than you are to run out of gas. Which means that we will really have to adopt our operations. So we have to become a lot more dynamic. We have to adapt our planning ahead of time to tell the driver, you still make it to the next charging stop or not. But before we can tell the driver, hey, you're going to make it to the next charging station, we of course have to have a sufficient network of charging points that can charge at a sufficient velocity. And of course, we also have to adapt our routes in a way that we actually have sufficient recharging opportunities, or ideally can come back to the depot. So in particular in the Benelux region, it's usually possible to come back to the depot because we're not having that large distances, but it of course requires some level of replanning. The second option that we're having is cargo bikes. I think most of us have seen them driving around in cities. And the reason why they're being used is that they're easier to park, they're cheaper than a truck, and they have almost no emissions. Even compared to an electric truck, a cargo bike comes at lower emissions. And it might even come at zero emissions if there's no battery involved, because then it's really just the human rider pedaling. But these cargo bikes, of course, also come with disadvantages. No one's ever tried to bike all the way with cargo from the Netherlands to Spain. And there's a good reason for not doing that. And that is we're very limited in our distance due to the fact that the velocity barely ever increases 25 kilometers per hour. At the same time, these cargo bikes, of course, also have a lot fewer capacity compared to a truck. So obviously, we also can't transport huge amounts on a longer transport leg. So what we have to do, if we want to use cargo bikes, we have to adapt our operations again. So the way that we can do this is we can have decoupling points somewhere on the outside of the city where the truck drives to, and then we start actually distributing on the last echelon, so within the city. We also have to take things into consideration such as elevation. Of course, it's a lot easier to bike downhill than uphill. And while this also makes some difference when it comes to the electricity usage of an electric truck or the gasoline usage of a conventional truck, it really affects cargo bikes to a lot greater extent than trucks. Then the third opportunity, just to name a few, is multimodal transport. So what multimodal transport means is that we actually transship at multiple points in time. So we might start with a truck, and then after the truck, we put things on a barge or a train, and then we put things on a truck again. That, of course, combines the best of two or maybe even more worlds. It means that we often have low emissions on the longer distances and then only the high emission truck operations on the first and last mile. But the reason why this is not taken up to as great as an extent as could be possible is the additional handling effort, and that the additional handling effort oftentimes implies that the transport is a lot slower. And not only slower, it can also mean that it becomes less reliable. So due to the fact that we have to handle, due to the fact that we can miss the train, of course, as soon as we miss a train, we're actually a day late or even 2 days late. And that is a reason why companies are not taking that up. So what we as a European Supply Chain Forum have been looking into together with a master's student is to predict the arrival time better, despite the fact that we have those multiple transport legs, which increases the reliability and as such can increase the uptake of multimodal transport. And if we look within cities, then we usually take a multimodal transport not because of interest, not because it reduces our cost, but quite often out of a necessity. So either we can physically not enter city centers. So in particular, if we look into small old town centers, then we're preferred to go in there with a cargo bike, or if we are in cities like Venice or Amsterdam or Delft, then potentially with a boat, because we can actually get a lot closer to the actual destination as compared to a truck. Because a big truck just has difficulties to get through narrow streets, might potentially additionally be limited by regulations, and that, of course, then also drives the uptake of multimodal transport. One solution that I would like to look into specifically, if we're looking into multimodal transport, is inland waterways. Inland waterways, as such, are a very great solution because we get the emissions out and we're putting things on a waterway that is anyways there. However, if we look at the numbers in the European Union, the inland waterway is the line very, very much at the bottom. Why is that the case? The case is, of course, on the one hand side, that it's very expensive to get through the waterways, that waterways are, of course, have issues with respect to how much water they actually carry, and a lot of operational issues. And if we're looking into these operational issues, we're currently tackling them as part of an Interreg project in the North Sea region. So if you're interested in that, wait a year and we hopefully can provide you with some more insights into that. So what I would like you to take away from this video on modal shift for reducing transport emissions is electrification. So what is the differences between electric and conventional trucks? Cargo bikes. What changes do we have to consider when it comes to operating cargo bikes? Multimodal transport. What are the advantages and what are the disadvantages? And specifically inland waterways in the context of multimodal transport. Thank you.